A single night of shelter would destroy everything she built. Celia Freeman, a freed slave who carved out her own homestead in 1870s Texas, made a fatal mistake when she opened her door to a bleeding white rancher during a thunderstorm. By dawn, Thomas Whitmore knelt before her with an ultimatum that would shatter her world. Marry him immediately, or face accusations of seducing him that would strip away her land, her reputation, and her freedom in a society that would never believe. Her word over his. Celia stared at the gold ring in his trembling hand, knowing that both choices led to her destruction, but only one might let her survive long enough to fight back. Dawn light sliced through the cabin's single window. The storm had passed. Silence hung heavy as morning mist. Celia Freeman stood by her cold fireplace, spine straight as iron. Her calico dress was wrinkled from sleeping in the chair. The rifle still rested across her lap from the long night's watch. Thomas Whitmore knelt on her wooden floor. His torn shirt revealed scratches from thorns and flight. Blood had dried on his temple. In his trembling hands, he held a simple gold ring. "Marry me." His voice cracked like old timber. "Or by noon today I tell Sheriff Clayton you seduced me." The words fell between them like stones into still water. Celia's dark eyes never left his face. "Your word against mine." "Who do you think they'll believe?" She knew. In 1870s Texas, a black woman's testimony meant nothing against a white man's accusation. The ring caught the morning light, throwing tiny reflections across the cabin walls. "And if I say yes to this arrangement?" Thomas's shoulders sagged. "We'll figure it out, both of us." Church bells tolled in the distance. The sound rolled across the prairie like a funeral march. Celia stared at the ring. She thought of her land deed, locked in the wooden chest beneath her bed. 5 years of backbreaking work to claim this small piece of earth. 5 years of proving herself worthy of ownership in a world that questioned her right to breathe. Refusing meant losing everything. Her homestead claim would be voided. The townspeople would drive her out, or worse. She'd seen what happened to women accused of impropriety. "I'm already destroyed," Thomas whispered. "This way, we both survive." The bells continued their relentless tolling. 12 hours earlier, the storm had been a living thing. Rain hammered Celia's cabin like fists on a coffin lid. Wind howled through the gaps in her walls, carrying the scent of lightning and fear. She'd been counting supplies for winter: beans, cornmeal, salt pork wrapped in brown paper. Each item represented hours of labor, coins saved from washing clothes in town. The math was always tight, always dangerous. The pounding on her door came sudden and desperate. Celia froze. No one traveled these roads after dark, especially not in weather that could kill a man. The pounding came again, harder. She lifted her rifle from its place beside the stove. Her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. Outside, the storm raged like the end of the world. "Please." The voice was raw, broken. "They're coming." A white man's voice. Celia's blood turned to winter. A black woman alone with a white man meant only one thing in the eyes of the law: death or worse. "I can't." Her words barely carried through the door. "You know I can't. Please. I'm hurt." Lightning illuminated the cabin. Thunder followed like cannon fire. Celia's hand trembled on the door latch. Every instinct screamed danger. But the voice outside carried something else. Genuine terror. She opened the door. Thomas Whitmore stumbled inside, trailing mud and blood. His expensive clothes were torn to rags. His horse lay collapsed in her yard, sides heaving. Celia recognized the boots. Hand-tooled leather that cost more than she made in 6 months. The Whitmore family owned half the county. Their cattle grazed on land that stretched to the horizon. "You're bleeding." Thomas touched his temple. His fingers came away dark. Hit a branch. In the dark. "Who's chasing you?" He looked away. "Can't say." Celia kept the rifle ready. "Then you can't stay." "Just until morning, please." The storm answered for him. Rain drove horizontal across the prairie. No man could survive that darkness. She closed the door. Thomas slumped against her wall. His breath came in short gasps. Fever burned in his eyes. "You're Thomas Whitmore." He nodded weakly. "Why should I help the son of the man who tried to buy my land for nothing?" "Because I'm not my father." Celia moved to her wash basin. She soaked a clean cloth in water. "Sit by the fire." Thomas obeyed like a broken man. She cleaned the wound. On his temple. He winced but didn't pull away. "What did you do?" she asked. "The right thing, I think." He was delirious, muttering about ledgers and papers, names she didn't recognize. His fever spiked as the night wore on. Celia sat in her chair, rifle across her knees. She watched him sleep by her fire. Outside, the storm gradually weakened. By dawn, they both understood the trap they'd walked into. A black woman. A white man. One night alone. Society would draw its own conclusions. Now Thomas knelt before her with his desperate offer. Marriage or ruin. The ring waited in his palm like a loaded gun. The church bells continued their morning song. Celia reached out. Her fingers closed around the gold band. It was warm from his touch. "We marry within the hour," she said, "or we both face ruin." Thomas nodded. Relief and shame warred in his expression. Celia slipped the ring onto her finger. It felt like a shackle, but it was her choice to make. The preacher's hands shook as he opened his worn Bible. Reverend. Mills had married hundreds of couples in his 30 years of service. None like this. Celia stood in her best dress, the blue cotton she saved for Christmas. Thomas wore his torn shirt, cleaned, but still stained with blood and mud. Two reluctant witnesses shuffled their feet behind them. "Do you, Thomas Whitmore, take this woman?" The words felt hollow in the small church. Dust motes danced in the colored light from stained glass windows. "I do." "Do you, Celia Freeman, take this man?" She looked at Thomas. His jaw was tight. His eyes held something she couldn't name. "I do." The ring slid onto her finger, cold metal against warm skin, a chain disguised as jewelry. "You may kiss the bride." Neither moved. The moment stretched like wire about to snap. Thomas leaned forward. His lips brushed her cheek. Barely a touch. More apology than affection. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The witnesses signed papers with grudging strokes, legal documents that bound them together like iron. Outside, the Texas sun beat down merciless. The ceremony had lasted 10 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. They walked back to her cabin in silence. The ground was still soft from the storm. Their feet left parallel tracks in the mud. Inside, Thomas sat at her small table. His fever had broken, but exhaustion remained. Celia moved around her kitchen, making coffee from beans she couldn't afford to waste. "Now you tell me," she said, "the truth." Thomas rubbed his face. His hands were gentleman's hands, soft from a life without hard labor. "My family has been stealing land for years." Celia set down 2 tin cups. The coffee steamed between them. "How?" "Forged documents. Fake witnesses. They target families who can't fight back. Take their land for nothing." She poured coffee. It was weak. Everything was rationed in her world. "And you discovered this?" "I found the ledgers, names, dates, amounts, dozens of families." His voice dropped. "Some I recognized. Good people who lost everything." Celia sat across from him. The table was small. Their knees almost touched. "So you threatened to expose them?" Thomas nodded. "My father gave me a choice. Keep quiet and inherit the ranch, or speak up and lose everything. You chose conscience. I chose to run. They framed me for cattle theft before I could act." Steam rose from their cups like prayers ascending. Celia studied his face. The fever had stripped away pretense. What remained looked like truth. The ledgers you mentioned, you have them? Thomas patted his coat pocket. Hidden, evidence of every stolen acre. For the first time since dawn, Celia felt something other than despair. Information was power, even in her powerless world. What happens now? We survive, however we can. The afternoon passed in careful silence. They moved around each other like dancers learning new steps. Thomas helped repair storm damage to her roof. His hands were clumsy with tools but willing. Celia watched him work. Sweat darkened his shirt. He cursed softly when he hit his thumb with the hammer. The sound was surprisingly human. At dinner, they shared her meager supplies. Salt pork and beans, cornbread made from coarse meal. He ate without complaint. You can read, he said, noticing the books on her shelf. My former mistress taught me. Before the war. Thomas nodded. Most people assume many things about me. Night fell like a curtain. They faced the question neither had spoken. Where would they sleep? Celia arranged blankets by the fire. You take the floor. I'll keep the bed. Of course. Thomas settled onto the hard planks. She blew out the oil lamp. Darkness settled over them like dust. Celia? Yes? I'm sorry for all of this. She didn't answer. In the darkness, sorry meant nothing. Only actions mattered. Days passed. They developed routines. Thomas helped with chores. Celia cooked and managed supplies. They spoke little but worked side by side. Sheriff Clayton visited. Twice. His eyes were suspicious. His questions careful. Heard you got married sudden. Love doesn't wait for convenience, Celia said. Clayton's stare lingered on Thomas. Funny thing. Whitmore cattle went missing same night as your wedding. Coincidence? Maybe. After Clayton left, Thomas's hands shook as he repaired the fence. He knows, Thomas said. Suspecting isn't knowing. But fear settled over them like winter frost. Townspeople whispered when they went to market. Conversations stopped when Celia approached. Children stared. Women pulled their skirts away. The marriage had made them both outcasts. At night, they sat by the fire. Thomas read aloud from her books. His voice was educated, refined. The words painted pictures of worlds beyond Texas. You never planned to marry, he said one evening. Marriage meant losing my land, my independence. Now you've lost both anyway. Celia poked the fire. Sparks rose like dying stars. Now I have protection, of a sort. Protection you never wanted. Want has nothing to do with survival. The logs crackled. Outside, wind whispered secrets across the prairie. Thomas pulled papers from his coat. The ledgers he'd mentioned. Page after page of careful records. Your name isn't here, he said. Should it be? If they were stealing from everyone. His brow furrowed. Why not you? Celia's blood went cold. She moved to her wooden chest. Her land deed lay inside, yellowed with age. She brought it to the firelight. Thomas examined the paper with growing alarm. This signature, he said. I know this handwriting. The fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. Truth flickered between them like flame. It's my brother's hand, on the witness line. The words hit like physical blows. Celia sank into her chair. What does that mean? Thomas looked at her with something like pity. It means your deed is forged. You never legally owned this land. The fire popped. A log collapsed into ash. You knew, she whispered. All along. Thomas set down the papers. I suspected. You chose me because I was vulnerable. I chose you because you deserved better. Celia stood. Rage burned through her like wildfire. You trapped me in marriage to a man I barely know. Stole my freedom, my choices. If I hadn't married you, you'd have lost everything when they came for the land anyway. So you get a wife and a clear conscience, how convenient. Thomas flinched. The accusation struck home. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Silence stretched between them. The fire burned low. Truth sat heavy in the room like smoke. Celia walked to the window. Outside, stars scattered across the endless sky. Beautiful and unreachable. Get out, she said. Celia, get out of my house. Thomas gathered his things. At the door, he paused. They'll come for the land, with or without me. Then I'll face them when they do. The door closed behind him. Celia was alone again. The silence was deafening. She looked at the forged deed in her hands. 5 years of believing in something that never existed. 5 years of building on a foundation of lies. Outside, Thomas's footsteps faded into the night. Morning would bring new choices, new consequences. But tonight, the truth burned like a brand against her heart. Thomas slept in the barn that night. Celia heard him moving among the hay bales, settling into exile. She stared at her ceiling until dawn painted the walls gray. Morning brought him to her door, hat in hand, eyes hollow as winter wells. I could have said nothing, he began. Let them take your land without warning, left you defenseless. Celia stood in the doorway. Her coffee grew cold behind her. Instead, you trapped me in marriage to ease your conscience. I gave you legal protection by stealing my choice. Thomas looked across her small homestead. Neat rows of vegetables, fence posts standing straight, everything built by her hands alone. Choice, he said. What choice did either of us have that night? The question hung between them like morning, mist. Celia stepped onto her porch. The boards creaked under her feet. You had the choice to tell me the truth. Would it have changed anything? She considered this, the storm, the desperation, the morning ultimatum. No, she admitted. But I deserved to know. Thomas nodded. You did. Thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm building on the horizon. They're coming, Thomas said. My brothers, Sheriff Clayton, they have papers to seize the land. When? Today. Maybe tomorrow. Celia felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, everything she'd built turning to sand. What do they want from you? Public confession, admission of cattle theft. In exchange, they'll let you keep a small portion of the land. The offer sat between them like poisoned honey, sweet and deadly. And if you refuse? Prison, maybe worse. Thomas straightened his hat. There's something else. Sheriff Clayton offered me safe passage. If I testify, you seduced me. Say the marriage was your idea. Celia's hands clenched into fists. Of course he did. They want to destroy you, make an example of what happens to people who step outside their place. The wind picked up. Dust devils danced across the prairie like ghosts. What will you do? Celia asked. Thomas met her eyes. What will we do? The word hung in the air. We. As if they were truly partners. As if the marriage meant something beyond survival. Hoofbeats approached from the east. Riders silhouetted against the morning sun. 3 men and Sheriff Clayton. They're here, Thomas said. Celia went inside. She opened her wooden chest. Beneath her few possessions lay the forged deed, the lie that had defined her life. She also found something else. Letters from other landowners. People who'd asked for her help with legal documents. She could read when they could not. Some of the letters mentioned problems with their deeds, discrepancies, missing witnesses. Celia had assumed it was poor record-keeping. Now she understood. A pattern of theft stretching back years. The riders stopped outside her fence. Sheriff Clayton dismounted first. His badge caught the sunlight like a mirror. Behind him came the Whitmore brothers, Marcus, the eldest, cold eyes and cruel mouth. Behind Marcus rode James, younger but meaner. Both carried themselves like men accustomed to taking whatever they wanted. Thomas stepped out to meet them. Celia followed. "Thomas," Marcus called. "Time to come home." "This is my home now." Marcus laughed. The sound carried no humor. "Married life suits you, though I question your taste in brides." Sheriff Clayton unfolded official papers. "I have a warrant for your arrest, Thomas. Cattle, theft, and documents transferring this land to its rightful owners." He handed the papers to Celia. The legal language was complex, but the meaning clear. Everything would be taken. "This woman's been squatting on Whitmore land for years," James said. "Time to set things right." Thomas stepped forward. His hand moved to his coat pocket. The ledger's hidden there. "Actually," he said, "it's time for the truth." He pulled out the papers, evidence of years of fraud, names and dates and amounts. These ledgers detail every illegal land seizure, every forged document, every family you've robbed. Marcus's face darkened. "Put those away, brother. Before you say something you'll regret." "I regret staying silent for so long." Thomas held up the papers. His voice carried across the yard. "Sheriff Clayton took bribes to ignore the thefts. Judge Morrison signed false seizure orders. The banker Roberts provided fake loans to justify takeovers." Clayton's hand moved to his gun. "That's enough. Dozens of families, hundreds of acres, all stolen." Celia stepped beside Thomas. "I have letters from victims, people who suspected but couldn't prove what happened to them." Marcus spurred his horse forward. "You're both lying." "Then let's take this to the territorial judge," Thomas said. "Let him examine the evidence." The brothers exchanged glances. James's horse pranced nervously. Clayton wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cool morning. "Put away the papers, Thomas," Marcus said. "We can work this out. Family business." "This stopped being family business when you started stealing from innocent people." Marcus's voice dropped. "You're choosing her over your own blood." Thomas looked at Celia. Her face was set like stone, ready for whatever came. "I'm choosing what's right." The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a line drawn in dust. Sheriff Clayton stepped forward. "I could arrest you both right now, disturbing the peace, making false accusations." "Do it," Celia said. "Arrest us in front of witnesses. Let people ask why you're so eager to silence us." Clayton hesitated. His authority depended on the appearance of legitimacy. Thomas raised the ledgers higher. "Everyone will know the truth. About the land thefts, about the corruption, about all of it." Marcus wheeled his horse around. "You're making a mistake, brother." "I made the mistake when I stayed quiet." The brothers rode away. Sheriff Clayton followed. But they'd be back, with more men, more threats. Thomas and Celia stood in their yard. Dust settled around them like aftermath. "We can't stay," Thomas said. "They'll find a way to destroy us both." "Where would we go?" "California, where mixed marriages are more common, where we might have a chance." Celia looked at her cabin, her garden, 5 years of backbreaking work. "I built this with my own hands. You can build again, somewhere safer." The wind carried the scent of approaching rain, another storm on the horizon. "If we run, we validate everything they believe about us. If we stay, we die." Thomas was right, but running felt like surrender. "There's another choice," Celia said. "We make the evidence public first. Let everyone know the truth before they can silence us. That makes us enemies of every powerful person in the territory. We're already their enemies." Thomas studied her face. "You want to fight. I want to choose. For once in my life, I want to make my own choice." The storm clouds gathered overhead. Lightning flickered in the distance. "Then we fight," Thomas said. They walked back to the cabin together. Partners in truth, partners in rebellion, partners in whatever came next. The first drops of rain began to fall. They gathered at dawn in the town square. Word had spread through whispered conversations and knowing glances. The preacher's wife, the blacksmith, the widow who ran the boarding house, people who'd lost land or knew someone who had. Thomas stood on the courthouse steps. The ledgers in his hands felt heavier than iron. Celia beside him, spine straight as a rifle barrel. 5 years ago, the Morrison family lost their farm, Thomas began. His voice carried across the square. Official reason was unpaid taxes. Real reason was forged documents. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Morrison stepped forward. Her weathered face held decades of grief. The Hendersons' ranch, seized for a debt that never existed. Thomas read from the ledgers. Names, dates, dollar amounts. More people emerged from doorways. Some nodded in recognition. Others looked away. Sheriff Clayton appeared at the edge of the crowd. His hand rested on his gun belt. Behind him, Marcus and James Whitmore sat their horses like judges of the dead. The Washingtons, the Garcias, the Sawyers. Thomas's voice grew stronger with each name. Dozens of families, hundreds of acres, all stolen through legal lies. A man in the crowd shouted, "Prove it." Thomas held up the ledgers. Every transaction documented, in my father's own handwriting. Marcus spurred his horse forward. My brother's been unwell. These are the ravings of a man who stole cattle and ran. Then examine the evidence, Celia said. Her voice cut through, the morning air like blade through silk. She pulled letters from her coat. Correspondence from families who suspected fraud. People who asked for help reading documents they couldn't understand. The crowd pressed closer. Truth had weight. It drew people like water in drought. Mrs. Patterson wrote to me about discrepancies in her deed. Mr. Santos questioned witness signatures that didn't match. The pattern was always there. Sheriff Clayton pushed through the crowd. That's enough, both of you are under arrest. For what crime? Thomas asked. Disturbing the peace, making false accusations. Thomas raised the ledgers higher. Then, arrest these two, because they speak louder than we ever could. The crowd shifted, anger replacing curiosity, years of suspicion crystallizing into certainty. Let them speak, someone called. Let's hear it all. Clayton's authority wavered like flame in wind. Too many witnesses, too many questions. Thomas continued reading. Property after property, family after family. The scope of the theft was staggering. Marcus rode his horse closer to the steps. You're destroying our family name. You destroyed it yourself. I'm just telling people what you did. Everything we built, gone. Everything you stole, returned. The brothers exchanged glances. James fingered something in his coat. Clayton's hand stayed near his gun, but the crowd had grown too large, too angry. Violence would only confirm guilt. Marcus wheeled his horse around. This isn't over. Yes, Thomas said. It is. The Whitmore brothers rode away. Sheriff Clayton followed, their authority crumbling like sand castles in rain. The crowd slowly dispersed, but the damage was done. Truth had been spoken, evidence presented. By noon, territorial authorities were riding toward town. Word had reached the capital. An investigation would follow. Thomas and Celia stood in their yard. The cabin looked smaller somehow. Temporary. We can't stay here, Celia said. No. Too many enemies now. They packed what little they owned. Clothes, tools, the books from Celia's shelf, everything else, would be left behind. Their wagon was small, pulled by the horse that had survived Thomas's flight, the same animal that brought him to her door that stormy night. Townspeople watched from windows as they loaded their belongings. Some faces showed sympathy. Others held judgment. Most showed nothing at all. Mrs. Morrison approached as they finished, packing, She pressed a small bundle into Celia's hands. "Food for the journey," she said. "And this." Inside the cloth was a handful of coins. Not much, but everything the old woman could spare. "Thank you for speaking truth," Mrs. Morrison whispered. "My husband would have been proud." Other families came forward. Small offerings. Quiet thanks. People who'd been too afraid to speak but grateful someone had. The territorial judge arrived that afternoon. Thomas handed over the ledgers. Formal statements were taken. Warrants issued. The Whitmore empire would fall. But justice moved slowly. Too slowly for safety. As the sun began to set, Thomas and Celia climbed onto their wagon. The horse stamped impatiently, ready for whatever road lay ahead. "California," Thomas said, "where we can start over. Will it be different, there?" "I don't know, but it can't be worse." Celia took the reins. Her hands were steady, calloused from years of work, strong enough to guide them wherever they needed to go. They rolled through town as darkness fell, past the courthouse where they'd spoken truth, past the church where they'd married in desperation, past the sheriff's office where corruption had festered like infection. The prairie opened before them, endless under starlight, beautiful and dangerous and free. "Was it worth it?" Celia asked. "Losing everything you knew?" Thomas looked at her in the moonlight. Her profile was strong, determined, unbroken by everything they'd endured. "I didn't lose everything." The wagon wheels turned steadily, carrying them away from the past, toward whatever future they could build together. "Did you?" Celia considered the question. Her land was gone. Her independence compromised. Her life forever changed by one stormy night. But something else had been gained, something harder to define. Choice. Real choice. Made freely despite impossible circumstances. "No," she said finally. "I didn't lose everything." The road stretched, ahead like a promise, uncertain but theirs to travel. Miles passed in comfortable silence. The horse found its rhythm. The wagon settled into familiar creaking. Behind them, the town disappeared into darkness. Thomas dozed against her shoulder. The weight was warm, reassuring. No longer the burden of a stranger, but the comfort of a partner. Dawn found them far from everything they'd known. The horizon painted itself gold and red, a new day arriving like hope. Thomas stirred as the sun rose. "Where are we?" "Somewhere else," Celia said. "Somewhere new." The road ahead split into multiple paths, different directions, different possibilities. Celia guided the horse to the westward fork, toward California, toward whatever waited there. "I never thanked you," she said quietly. Thomas straightened. "For what? I destroyed your life." Celia was quiet for a long moment. The wagon wheels turned. The horse's hooves beat steady rhythm on packed earth. "That night you knocked on my door," she said finally. "Why would you thank me for that?" She reached over. Her fingers found his hand, calloused now from shared work, changed by everything they'd endured together. "You gave me a choice I didn't know I had." Thomas looked at their joined hands, dark and light intertwined, strong together in ways neither could be alone. The wagon rolled on toward the rising sun. Behind them, the past faded like morning mist. Ahead, the future waited, uncertain, dangerous, free. Celia snapped the reins. The horse quickened its pace. They had miles to go before they found home. And that is all to the story, for now. Please, let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.